Western Sahara, a sparsely populated vast desert swath, threatens to be the latest flashpoint in a region rife with conflict. It's located to the southwest of Morocco and is mostly controlled by the Moroccan state. But about a fourth of it is the self-declared Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, whose independence movement is known as the Polisario Front. Both sides went to war in the mid-1970s after Spain ended its rule, and tens of thousands of Sahrawis still live as refugees. The UN negotiated a truce in 1991, but tensions have long been simmering. In the last few days, the Polisario leader issued a decree ending a commitment to the nearly 3-decade-long ceasefire over a border confrontation, and the group said it launched attacks on Moroccan forces. Morocco, whose territorial claims include the Western Sahara's phosphate deposits and fishing waters, had announced that it would resume military operations at a key crossing on the buffer zone between both territories. It blamed the Polisario Front for blocking the movement of goods and people. For its part, the Polisario Front said that it's Morocco that violated the ceasefire with these actions and claims that civilians were attacked. The UN, which maintains a peacekeeping operation, has been trying to preserve the ceasefire.
The Secretary General regrets that these efforts have proved unsuccessful and expresses his grave concern regarding the possible consequences of the latest developments.
This may be unfolding in what is a remote corner of the African continent, but like so many other conflicts, the consequences can be far-reaching in a region that already knows too much war. Arwa Damon, CNN, Istanbul.
Well, my next guest is the representative of the Polisario Front at the United Nations. He says Morocco is occupying the Western Sahara and that, quote, Morocco cannot have its own cake and eat it too. Dr. Sidi Omar is a diplomat and an academic from Western Sahara. He's speaking with us today on behalf of the pro-independence Polisario Front. And sir, thank you for joining us. Negotiations involving Morocco, Algeria, Mauritania and your organisation have been at a standstill since 2019. Your president tried to reach out to the Moroccan government, as I understand it. How do you reignite discussions at this point?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Frankly speaking, at the moment, it's very difficult to talk about any peaceful negotiations because Morocco has already launched a military attack on our land and our people, to which we have had to respond. So it all depends on how the developments on the ground. But if you just allow me very quickly to remind your viewers that the whole crisis started when Morocco launched an attack on a group of civilians who were protesting peacefully against Morocco's illegal occupation of Western Sahara, a violation that the United Nations also testified to. And that was the end of this almost 30 years ceasefire that we concluded with Morocco under the auspices of the United Nations to organize a referendum for self-determination. But as we know, Morocco has been allowed, with the help of some international actors, actually, to block this referendum with impunity.
The Sahara Press Service said on Saturday that the Polisario Front has launched attacks against the Royal Moroccan Army in the Western Sahara, quote, and I quote here, causing loss of lives and equipment and disrupting its military plans. Now, the Moroccan government has not yet commented on these claims. What is your response?
First of all, let me underline that the Sahrawi people, the people of Western Sahara, have never wished to return to war. It's been imposed on us. All that we want is to be given a chance to live freely in our land and in peace with all our neighbors, including Morocco.
Okay.
But it was Morocco to blame for reigniting war in Western Sahara, which obviously will have, as you have said in the documentary before, that will have dire consequences on peace and security in the whole region. So indeed, we are now in an open war where the two parties are engaged along the Moroccan military war in Western Sahara.
So are you prepared to fight that war? Because Morocco's king on Monday warned that his country would react with the, quote, greatest severity to any attack in the Western Sahara?
Indeed, we have declared that we have resumed our legitimate struggle for liberation, a war that we fought against Morocco for 16 years, at the end of which we forced Morocco to sit on the negotiating table and agree with us on the settlement plan that led to the ceasefire and the hope of a self-determination referendum, which, as I said before, has not been held because Morocco was allowed to block it in the face of the outrageous inaction by the United Nations. So you can imagine it, 30 long years of waiting for the referendum to be held, for us exercising maximum restraint and being extremely patient, have just emboldened Morocco to go on and continue the occupation of our land. So we have been left with no other option but to resume our armed struggle against Morocco until we end the occupation of our land and bring freedom to our country.
Who is involved in this conflict, aside from the people of Western Sahara and Morocco? We see proxy wars, sadly, or interference from other countries in conflicts around this wider region on a regular basis. I wonder if you can just give us a sense of who else is involved, who you have been in touch with in the international community, and whether you've received any support from any other parties.
This conflict is actually a continuation of an international conflict between the Sahrawi people, led by their legitimate representative, the Frente Polisario, and the occupying forces of Morocco. These are the two parties to this conflict in Northwest Africa. We are the two parties who have negotiated the peace settlement, and we are the two parties who are now engaged on the ground in Western Sahara. Whom we have engaged, obviously, it is the United Nations, Secretary General, and the Security Council, because, as you know, Western Sahara issue is, before the conflict started, is an issue of decolonization on the agenda of the United Nations. And the United Nations is responsible and still for enabling our people to exercise the right to self-determination. So I was speaking of an international conflict that will indeed, if it's allowed to continue, have dire consequences in regional peace and security in the region of North Africa.
As the politics of this continue and escalate at this point, and we've been listening to your reasons why and to your explanation of how this has been going on for as long as it has, just describe life for people on the ground, if you will. Politics can infuse the headlines. How does what is going on the political front and on the sort of military front affect the life of daily people, or the daily life of people? Apologies.
Well, if you have an illegal occupation going on for almost over 40 decades, you have people living in the occupied territories of Western Sahara under daily oppression, and land that has been sealed off from international community. No one is allowed to enter Western Sahara, that has been converted into the largest prison on earth. So you can imagine what situation our people are living there under this continuing operation. Now, of course, with the war going on, we expect the Moroccan occupying authority to intensify its repression against our people. And I launch an appeal from your respected channel to all international community to come to the aid of our people in the occupied territories, who will be subjected to more repression by the Moroccan authorities as the war goes on.
The Moroccan king, reportedly speaking after a telephone call with the UN Secretary General, has said that Rabat remains committed to a ceasefire and has decried the closing of the key highway that crosses between the territory and Mauritania, that blocks the trade routes, of course. Your response to his words of a commitment to a ceasefire?
This is a bluff. It was Morocco itself that has violated the ceasefire. And Morocco itself has actually acknowledged publicly that they launched an operation, a military operation on Friday morning, the local time of Western Sahara. So we don't believe that Morocco genuinely committed to any ceasefire. Now Morocco seems to give the impression that they really and genuinely attached to the ceasefire. This is a bluff, and again, it's too late because the war has unfortunately started.